Okay, well, moving on. Embedded style sheets. So we'll talk about embedded style sheets next. With an embedded style sheet, the styles are in the same document that you're using, but instead of being part of the actual tags, they are in a separate area of the page. Usually there's the very beginning in the header section. Is typically where you would put that stuff. And here's one example. We'll take a look at source here. So this is the same source that we're seeing um, on the PDF. So you can see the right there. There's the tag style, and it says type CSS. So here it says EM. For every EM or emphasis, we're going to say that the font weight will be bold and the color will be black. All H1s will use a font from this font family. And what this means is that we're giving it a couple of different fonts to use. And the first one is our preference, Tahoma. And then the second one will be our second preference, and the third. And because not all browsers support all fonts, what we're doing is we're simply telling it what our preference on fonts is. And the browser will attempt to give us, obviously, our first preference, followed by our second, and then our third. Font size 12 point. For all P tags or paragraph tags, we'll have a 12-point font. And the font family on those would be Arial or sans serif. And special, dot special, anytime you see a property that begins with a dot, that means it's what they call a custom class, or something you're making up. You're making up your own type, style type when you do that. They call it a class, and we'll see how this works. And that gives a color of looks like it's that same deep blue color from before. Line height included in HTML5? I believe it is, yeah. Sure. Okay, so if we go here, we see the H1 tag, which is just over a little so we can see a little better. The H1 tag right down here says class special. That means it's going to use this color. That's our blue, our deep blue. And it's an H1, so that means it's also going to use one of these fonts. And so then if we go over here, we see that that's the H1, Dytel and Associates. And the color certainly looks like that right color, and the font will assume that worked. Next one is a P tag. Nothing else in there, just plain P tag with some text. But we know the P tag is going to use a font size of 12 point. And that's big for a P tag, so because P tags don't typically use that size font. Typically a little smaller, maybe a 10. And then further down, we have another H1 tag, but this H1 tag doesn't include the class like the first one does, so the only thing we're going to know about that is it's going to use one of those fonts. Then we've got the P tag again, but this P tag uses that class special, so we can see that the color there is the blue color, with the exception of Fortune 1000 companies, because that we see that's the emphasis, EM. It looks like italics, and it used to be an I tag, but they changed it, I for italics, but they changed it to EM for emphasis. If we look at the emphasis tag, we see that the font weight is bold and the color is black. So it actually changes the colors because that's the class set to do that. And here again is the embedded style sheet. Of course, all these examples are on my website. Looks like this one is not in color. That's interesting. So look at some of the different elements and MIME types. Styles that are placed in a style element use selectors to apply style elements throughout the entire document. Style element type attributes specifies the MIME type, the specific encoding format of a style sheet. Style sheets use text/CSS. So yeah, that's fairly typical for that. That's in the right there. Style text CSS. Um, 4.3. Do we have that here? Oh, here's your common ones used. So CSS almost always uses that, and then there's some other types are text slash JavaScript, which we'll see. Images, you have images as well. So the style sheet's body declares the CSS rules for the style sheet, and to achieve separation between CSS3 code and HTML5, that's in the styles, right? So if you go back to the source code, you see that twice, but is that the style is here, and then in the HTML itself, we don't see any style instructions. So that we established our separation between style or formats and data, right? This is data, and it's separated from the format up here. So that's one of the goals of CSS, is to separate data from or content from format. Font weight property specifies the boldness of the text. The options are bold, which is which you know what that is. Normal is the default. Bolder is bolder than bold. So lighter can be lighter than normal text, and you can play with all of these. Boldness can also be specified as a number between 100 and 900. Again, style classes. If it begins with a dot, that means it's a class. And a class is something you create yourself. It's user defined. It's nothing special. Didn't exist until whoever wrote it. And at that point, you can use that, and you just have to add the class prefix to the whole thing, just like we did here. H1 class equals special. Then what happened is all the rules under special got included with the rules that I have for H1. Font family specifies the name of the font to use. We generally give a couple of different generic fonts to use instead of a specific font in case the browser does not support a specific font. And again, it will try to use one of those fonts. Some of the common generic ones, and it's generally a good idea to try and stick to some of the more common ones, because then you know the browser is most likely will support it. The generic font serif, which would include Times New Roman and Georgia. Sans serif, which is your Arial, Verdana, and Futura. Cursive, Fantasy, and Monospace. The size of the font that you want to use as well. And you have a couple of different options. You can get really small with XX small, kind of small with X small, smaller, medium, large, larger, X large, and XX large. So you can have different font sizes as well, and I believe you can actually just give a number for these as well. Applying a style. In many cases, the styles applied to an element, the parent or ancestor element, also apply to the elements nested inside. So that's true. So that would have been the case with our EM element. So, for example, yeah, that would have been the case for the emphasis element, but it wasn't because emphasis specified a color, specified a action for the font weight and the color. But actually, what it did inherit from the P tag that it's nested in is it would have gotten the font size and the font family. So if we look at that specific one, we're going to see that this thing, it still has about it still has the same size and actual font as the one it's nested in, which is the plain old P. But the ones that were specified different in the emphasis, which is the color and the strength of it, are the only differences. Everything else is the same. We'll talk about resolving conflicts later on. You could have conflicts when things like that happen, but we'll resolve later on. Vitel and Associates Incorporated. How is the space added below? Let's see. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Oh, how is that space? Um, how is that's not doing it? Well, the H1 and the P tags automatically add a line as well. I think that might be just its normal spacing. I don't think that's anything special. Because the H1 tag, H1s are a type of paragraph. So they automatically add spaces afterwards. Styles may be defined by a user, author, or user agent, and you can do that however you want. Styles cascade, hence the term cascading style sheet, are flowed together as such that the ultimate appearance of elements on a page result from combining styles defined in different ways. Styles defined by the user take precedence over styles defined by the user agent, such as the browser. Styles defined by authors take precedence over styles defined by the user. That would be the styles inside of the web pages themselves. Most styles defined by parent elements are inherited by children. They're inherited unless they're overwritten. Well, I guess that would be the case too. Meaning that you get that when a child overrides one part of a style that it gets from a parent, that doesn't eliminate the preferences from the parent completely, just that one particular style. Text declaration is an interesting thing. Some of the ones you have are underline, overline, line through, and blank. We have that one here as well. That is this one here, CSS3. Yeah, right? No, it's not. Okay. Let me see. That's a little out of order. Let's see where that one is. Okay, we're going to look at a couple of different examples. Looking at some conflicts, contains examples of inheritance, and we'll see how those conflicts resolve. Okay. That might be this example here. Okay, here we go. There we are. Okay. So, if there's a conflict between them, here are your styles. Is there any conflicts here? Yes. In this case, we've got text decoration. For text decoration for the A tag, which is the reference tag, redefined. Once is a custom class nodeck dot nodeck. So A dot nodeck means that nodeck is a class, but it only applies to A types or A tags. And A colon hover. Hover is a behavior. Colon means, so A is the tag, colon means it's sort of a separator, and hover is a behavior. So what that means is when the mouse hovers over the A tag, you use the text decoration of underline. Now for A, no decoration, there's not really a conflict between those two, because when you're not hovering, it'll use the no deck rule, and when you're hovering, it'll use the hover one. So there's no real conflicts there. Now for this one here, UL and UL, that's an embedded. So here it's UL, and then UL is embedded within ULs. For this UL, it's going to give a margin of 20 pixels. And for the UL, which is an embedded one, you can have font size of .em, which is 80% of the size of a lowercase letter m. That's a relative, what they call a relative font size. And that's what we've got going on here. So I don't see any conflicts, actually. Let's go on, because there's definitely no real conflicts there. Resolve. And this shows you the code. Got here as well. There are your styles. Yeah, so there's no real conflict there yet. I'm not sure why they're saying there's a conflict. When you hover over it, you get that website. Sure your style sheets work in various web browsers. Test them on many web client browsers and use that. Yeah, so I mean that's always a good idea to take these things and look at them on multiple browsers. You should probably have several different browsers. You should be testing them on IE and Firefox and Google Chrome and Safari and probably Opera. That would be some of the main ones to test them on. Different operating systems as well, so Windows, Mac, and Linux is good. But you also want to use those validators as well. Pseudoclasses give you access to content that's not declared in the document. Hover pseudoclass is activated when the user moves the mouse over an element. So they're calling it a pseudoclass. I kind of think of it more as a action or an event in the sort of object-oriented world. We call these events. But it's built in. It's not something you declare. Where regular class is something you define, the pseudoclass or the action or event is actually built in. Yeah, you can't put any spaces. That would cause a problem. All right. Any questions so far?